Imagine your company isn't Spotify with one product pipeline, but 20 independent government portal style projects, running on Ansible provisioned VMs and then some on Kubernetes and some delivered into other customer data centers, some operated by clients themselves. Each team building their own CI/CD, their own secrets management, their own integrations, and it just leaves you with a million wheels that you can reinvent. Joining me today is Nico. He's a platform engineer. His team is in the process of solving this very problem. Instead of forcing every project into one mold, they are building a platform as a buffet with Pulumi. So, Nico, it's great to have you here.
Yeah, so my name's Nico, and as you already introduced, I work for a company named SEITENBAU, based in the very south of Germany at Lake Constance, beautiful area. And yeah, as you said, my team and I are trying to unify everything in a landscape of different product teams. So yeah, we kind of came up with this buffet analogy to just offer people like ready-made pizzas, which they don't have to cook themselves, so to speak. And they still have a lot of flexibility to pick what they need. So that's basically what this is going to be about. Like ready-made stuff, you can think of the offering in the buffet as stuff like CI/CD components or pre-configured components you're going to run in your Kubernetes clusters or artifact storage. A lot of things you see over and over again, and no matter how different projects are. That's kind of the setting I'm going to talk about. But first, a little bit of, who are we actually? So as I've said already, we're a smaller company. And as Adam introduced also, we have a lot of projects focused on public sector in Germany, like web portals for citizen services, but we also do have private customers. Setting brings us to, a little bit different than you usually find in a lot of other projects when you talk about platform engineering. I'm going to talk about the specific challenges in a second. Just a bit more context. So we have mostly independent project teams, like Adam also mentioned in the introduction. They basically have very much freedom what kind of technologies they choose. So it's primarily Java applications, but we also have other tech stacks, and it's really, really various landscape. And to make it even more challenging for us as a platform team, sometimes we have operations done by us as service for the customer. Sometimes it's just deliverables. It's a lot of variety there. And despite all that, of course, we want to not reinvent the wheel and share best practices. Platform engineering is kind of a thing you find quite quickly if you want to tackle this challenge. And what's kind of the challenge for us here is that, for some projects, especially in the government sector, you can't just go to public cloud and easily do that. So we do have a lot of on-premises infrastructure, also kind of inherited, so to say. And for other projects, we still need the flexibility for cloud, because then public cloud is perfectly fine as a solution, especially if it's not a government project. So we have kind of all of this to kind of bring together. And that's a challenge, a lot of resources for platform engineering. If you start digging around and look for best practices, they're kind of focused on a single product. If you think of Spotify with Backstage and things like this, they're kind of organized around microservices teams focusing on different parts of a single big product. So for us, it's a different thing, because we have so many different products, which sometimes have some overlap, but often don't have. Still, they have kind of similarities because it's web applications. So they're, of course, not completely different from each other. What's kind of the challenge for us is that we can't just take off-the-shelf solutions like Backstage, because they're kind of often more tailored to this scenario with a single product, and not to kind of our day-to-day business with a lot of different products. So that's kind of the thing we came into, and that's also where we started to discover Pulumi, help us build kind of this buffet. But what we did first is kind of take a step back and see, okay, now we have these different product teams and these different things we have in common. What's kind of the denominator we can find? What's kind of everyone expecting when you go to the field, to stay with this metaphor? And we came up with more or less this. So everyone needs to kind of put their code somewhere. Everyone needs to build artifacts. Everyone needs to store them somewhere. you have to do some security scanning and compliance stuff. That's just becoming more and more important for everyone. Of course, people will test your things. You want to securely manage credentials, because in every project you have like several components kind of wanting to talk to each other. And so you have to kind of set up secure communication for databases and things like this. So secrets management is also something which kind of plays into almost every project. So that's basically kind of the framework you can arrange. Like if you stay with this food metaphor, it's like kind of your starters, the main dish, and the dessert. So that's kind of the image we came up with. All of this would be amazing to have like a single unified developer portal where people can just like click a few buttons and it's like I want a new repo for some service, and then you hit a button and then you get the baseline with proper configuration, which is integrated, obviously. So that's kind of the goal. There's also like the line still heavily work in progress, because for now, we're just focusing like on building the actual foundation, and the nice front end is still kind of in the way. And now, with that structure in mind, you can basically go to the buffet and choose your menu. This is just like some fictional examples for what a project could look like. We could have some project which kind of uses GitLab for CI and needs to build Maven artifacts and Docker containers, which are then applied to Kubernetes clusters. With Vault secrets management, you could have like another project which just builds an image and runs it in OpenShift instead of just standard Kubernetes, for instance, using GitLab agent. You could have plain Debian packages. And as you mentioned, Adam, we also still have VMs with Zenball. That's also kind of a common scenario. You could do GitOps with Flux and many more. So there's a lot of variation, but still kind of, ready-made pieces to put in there. So that's basically what people can choose. We can like wonder, okay, we decided we want to offer some buffet. We want to have this flexibility. Now someone has to kind of cook it. So that's where now Pulumi comes into play. And that's what this admittedly kind of cluttered slide likes to convey, is that we have a lot of services here. For instance, like the binary repository for build artifacts, or like GitLab for saving the code and also doing CI. We do have clusters, we have VMs, we have some platform here, we have identity providers. So there's a lot of things. And all of these things need to be connected in a way that people can just use them and not kind of tinker around half a day to kind of bring their pipeline to deploy to their cluster. But they just want to kind of say, okay, we have a cluster staging or whatever, and we want to commit, and then our pipeline should deploy to this cluster without us worrying how to kind of put the credentials wherever. And that's kind of the thing where Pulumi now comes into play. And we're using it together with Python. That just kind of turned out to be like super nice for us to maintain day-to-day tasks and super easy to extend things. And the second piece we have is like a unified configuration for, so to speak, what parts of the buffet individual projects want to use. And this together is then like by different Pulumi stacks. I'm going to show how we kind of conceptually build this in a sec. But the point here is we have a lot of things like, on the one side, setting up systems. We can see that for GitLab here, for example, the actual system installation, patching it, because I mentioned we have a lot of like on-premise stuff because of compliance reasons and everything. And we still also want to configure the actual system after we set it up. That's like setting up the project, setting up build variables for the cluster integration mentioned, things like this. So we have like, the need to do both of this. And the nice thing is that we can use like a single tool for everything. That's also kind of here. We have like decided to use multiple Pulumi programs, not like a big stack, which kind of throws in the entire buffet, but we have like for all the things we need, we have like a lot of programs. So for instance, we have like one program which configures and installs like our GitLab instances. Then we have a program which rolls out the actual project configuration, which puts in the centralized config to show like an idea how we approach this also later. So yeah, you see here above like the configurations, like another program which sets up like DC application and stuff. And then we have other programs which spin up clusters with like add-ons for such that project teams don't have to worry about, for instance, how to configure cert-manager with internal CAs and stuff like this. So we also have components for this. And for all of this, we have like different Pulumi stacks, and these pull in a central project configuration for now the individual project teams.
Do these stacks reference each other, or are they independent, or how are you connecting them?
They do at times reference each other, yes, but often they're also independent, and the kind of point of intersection is this project configuration. So things which are like commonly needed, like for instance, I don't know, a group name, which kind of is like in our central IDP for all team members. This group name is specified in the configuration, and then at all points where we need it, we can just pull it from there. And we know we have like the single point where we can maintain this. And if something changes, if whatever permissions change, we maintain that in that one single point, and then every Pulumi state can just pull it in dynamically. But we do use occasionally also like stack outputs and things. So yeah, that's kind of after a bit of we tried a few things, and then we kind of found out that this unified configuration is actually quite elegant for our use case with these. You don't know how many components, because at times there's like new requirements coming in for a service which a team needs, and then we find out, okay, other teams need that as well, so we can add it to our portfolio, and then it's super easy to just know, okay, I don't have a lot of dependencies to other things. I can just like add a new section in this config and then build up some Pulumi programs, and there we go. So that's so far it proved like quite flexible and extensible also. And I don't want to go like too deep into this config, but it's just like to illustrate. So we have like, for instance, like the team group from our LF or identity provider. We have some things like how the path in GitLab is named, or how the repository in the binary manager where Docker images are saved, so how this is named. These are things which are just specified here, and if you need to reference it, you can put it from there. For example, like this one here, we reference the project Docker pull secret for setting up the GitLab CI, and that's kind of practical to know it like in this configuration here. And it's also super nice because Identic is super nice to write that in Python code for this use case, because you can just like use type annotations and specify kind of a model, and you get validation, everything for free. So that's how we built that. So we kind of specify what we need for our config in a shared Python package, which we then can import in like every single sub-project. Then there's another Git repo with the actual config files in it, and they get parsed automatically thanks to the Identic. So that's part of our common library. This library also contains like a few components. So I know by now you can also reference components, for example, like part by part from Git repos. But what we do is like, because it's only used within our team currently to set up the core platform. So we decide to build like a single big package which contains everything we need, and then we can kind of do that in as dependency in all our projects. And so there's just one, but of course Pulumi would give you even more flexibility to kind of pull in individual components or stuff from repos per component, or also like one repo. But in our case, it turned out that a single package is kind of easy to handle. The configuration in itself is actually dynamically pulled from a Git repo during each Pulumi run. So we have like really fresh configuration every run. So if you change some project property, it's like immediately in every stack. And that's also kind of quite useful. And so we can kind of flexibly find the amount of abstraction we need in this project configuration. We don't have to kind of and specify every detail of like each and every system, but we can just say, okay, we abstract that, and further details on a specific system, we can still use like Pulumi stack properties or like in the individual programs. But in a central config, we kind of build an abstraction that works for us, for this case, that just contains enough information to distinct the projects from each other, for instance, some flags for Kubernetes clusters. Do they need cert-manager, something like this? You can turn it on and off, but we don't go into more details for this. The details are then kind of encapsulated in the individual stacks. So yeah, that turned out to be also super nice. Also, thanks to the possibility to actually do all of this with Python code with Pulumi, because then we can kind of build abstractions that are like to understand, also to kind of, if someone, okay, the project now needs not only a Docker repository, but also a Python repo, you do have to add like one entry in this YAML and don't need to kind of worry on how under the hood this is actually like implemented. It's kind of nice thing to use a programming language for infrastructure, because you have like a lot of flexibility and can kind of really tailor your configuration as you need it.
That's awesome.
So that's definitely, it's the one thing. And then there's also Pulumi components. It's just like a little bit of illustration how we use them. For example, if we have Longhorn for storage in Kubernetes, we do have a component which kind of adds like Longhorn and snapshotting stuff, and also default storage classes, which makes sense from our point of view. For example, for test clusters, you probably don't always need replication for every volume. So we just configure things like this and pack it into a console component. And then we can just like at the point where we set up and configure our clusters, use these components. And that's also a really practical feature which we found. That more, for example, for Flux, that's actually a bit more interesting, this one, because we tend to use like, we see different providers. So what we can do here is actually, if someone wants to use Flux for GitOps, we can kind of key pair for like deploying it, can actually add this key pair to our GitLab instance, and then also use the Flux provider to create a Flux instance in a cluster. And we have a single component and just say, Flux here, and stuff gets installed, and Pulumi kind of handles the rest for us. And then the projects can use Flux or whatever they need. But in a case like this, it's really, really nice to have components to just plug together different providers also. So yeah, that's a really nice feature too. And yeah, it's already like so far. So it's, I guess, almost 2 years now that we were using it. Actually, like we're still completely with Kubernetes open source only for custom backend. But it's super, super flexible, and we love this resource model, like how flexible it is, and also the possibility to just add dynamic providers. If we have some legacy API or stuff we want to build in, we can just go on and write a few lines of Python and connect it with all the other providers. And especially also the new feature to just use any Terraform provider. That's super awesome for us, because we can basically provision whatever infrastructure we need. These were a few findings we had so far. And check 2 far things changed already. This was with the Kubernetes provider. Then waiting conditions were sometimes a bit difficult, like I said, with the Helm releases, as far as I remember. But if you use like I always mix them up. It's like one is like calling Helm, and the other one is like creating Pulumi resources. I think it's Chuck creates the resources, and I'm always mixing them up. So anyways, the one which creates Pulumi resources works really well so far. So it's more like really small things, which we found that sometimes stocks are a bit brief or stuff, but that's kind of the only small things we found, like typing welcome things or stuff. But the gist of these points is we have a few small things, of course, which can always be improved, but all in all, it's super flexible, and we're super happy with Pulumi so far. And also the central configuration really makes it easy, and the opportunity to just use code and programming language you like. So improvements can always be done, but all in all, it's a super flexible and cool tool. So yeah, that's kind of how we can use Python, Pulumi, and a bit of configuration to build a buffet.
That's awesome. Wow. And so it's 2 years you've been running the system for 2 years?
Less, 2 years. And
if you have some big takeaways, like if you could talk to yourself 2 years ago, what would be, the important information you might pass along? What have you learned along the way?
So definitely to kind of go into this centralized configuration part earlier, because I think it's been almost a year until we kind of figured out that that's kind of the central configuration with this together with kind of super useful. So I would have done this a bit earlier, I guess. And otherwise, of course, the dynamic Terraform providers feature also didn't exist back then. So that would have been cool to have earlier. But anyways, now it's here, so it's amazing. And so far, I mean, we didn't try like hundreds of providers, but all of them we tried so far, or like kind of without any issue. All in all, I'd say the choice was solid to make. We don't regret like going with like, also because Pulumi was still quite new back then. It's still kind of new, but by now I guess it's more people know about it. But yeah, so all in all, we're quite happy with our decision, I'd say.
That's awesome. So you mentioned like, okay, so your food metaphor, the buffet. So like Flux is one of the items. That's your macaroni salad or something. And you mentioned like Longhorn storage. What else? Like, what else can I choose from?
These storage components, it's just like for Kubernetes as an example, but the buffet is kind of more generic to also say, okay, like these package registries I mentioned, it's a thing you can choose. The simple choice, if I want like Kubernetes or VM, is kind of a thing I can choose from. Then in the Kubernetes cluster, as I said, yeah, maybe if you need cert-manager, if you want Longhorn for storage, or if you say, okay, we actually don't have any persistency, so leave it. It's just like also one, I just basically put Flux in there because it's a bit more interesting as a component, because it does like combine few providers. That's what I wanted to show with this and why I included it. So then you can choose if you want to, for example, here there's also these GitLab agents, for example, to do your deployments instead of GitOps, if you want to use this or not. So that's kind of the flexibility you have. You can also say, okay, I'm kind of happy not using any of these registries we provide, but we kind of, for example, if we have an open source component, we might publish it directly somewhere. So it's the freedom to choice is kind of in the way to, also which parts of this offering you need. You don't have to take every like course. For example, you can just go with a salad to sing with the analogy. So that's a choice. And then, of course, like within the individual stuff, like, how your cluster is configured, which networking interface you like to use, Cilium or something else, for example. So that's all the choices you can make in our kind of offering. The teams just have to say like what they need, and then we can then with the choices. Or also kind of, if it's something we don't offer yet, but find out it's like kind of makes sense to offer it in a generic way for multiple teams, we can also say, okay, let's add this together.
Yeah, that makes sense. Have you had any challenges around like versioning? Like you need to update some component, and then do you just keep people on the older one, or has this been a concern?
Occasionally, yes, but the thing is, we're kind of in the lucky position that it's mostly like kind of more short-lived testing environments. So in the worst case that things just don't go well with upgrades, we can always kind of throw it away and build new. So that's kind of for the luxury, which we probably wouldn't have in product environment. But beyond that, it's mostly so far teams were quite happy when we just said, okay, we'll update your clusters. Be happy with that. Then we just roll it out. And so we try to kind of stay with like the latest versions. But of course, we kind of talk with the teams, like if there's some breaking changes or stuff, we could find a solution with them, maybe just install patches or something.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that occasional challenges, but due to the thing that we kind of provide the baseline and then the teams are relatively free on what they use, we've been quite good so far. I mean, you can feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. On the Pulumi page, there should be a link to my profile, so feel free. Otherwise, our company is like SEITENBAU.com. So you're interested. So I guess that's all.
Awesome. Oh, like if you were going to try to sell me on this approach, like what's the biggest benefit you think? Like say I have a similar situation, although like I have to actually operate things in prod, so I can't just throw it away. But like what do you see as the biggest benefit to this approach that should make me think about, building components rather than like going all in on Backstage or something?
I guess you can actually build what you need without having to do everything yourself. So with Backstage, you kind of of course, you can also use plugins and stuff and customize it. And in fact, you can also use Backstage together with this. No one's stopping you from kind of building the base layer with this, and then it's still using Backstage as the front end for it. But I guess, or I'd say the main benefit is that you can kind of, find the things that work for you that you also need, with the flexibility to put in like legacy systems, as I've said, with relatively low effort, because you can use dynamic providers, and basically you have to implement, create, update you need, and then it's just a regular provider like everything else, and you can kind of plug it together with all your ready-made things. And so that's, I'd say, the main benefit, that you can find stuff that works for your organization and for your concrete demands. And still, you don't have to say, okay, I need to now fiddle with all the APIs by myself because I have a ready-made provider which handles all of this for me. So yeah, it's kind of a nice sweet spot, I'd say.
That's awesome. Okay, so thank you so much. If anyone out there wants to connect with Nico, find out more, you can connect with him on LinkedIn. Also, the Pulumi community, he's on there, Pulumi Slack community. So that wraps up our look into how to build a buffet, an infrastructure platform as a buffet, I think you're calling it. With Pulumi, you identify common stages, you create these reusable components for whatever your needs are, whether it's Kubernetes or GitLab or Flux or even Ansible, and then let the teams build what they need. So if this video helped you out, leave a comment, hit the thumbs up, and let us know what CI, CD, or infrastructure tools that you need to handle. What's the hard part of your platform engineering journey? Drop that in the comments, and reach out to Nico. This was great. Thank you so much for sharing this.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.